Double row rotator cuff repair featuring the helicoil Regenesorb suture anchor preloaded with Ultra Tape and Ultra Braid suture and the Footprint Ultra PK knotless suture anchor. In this Smith & Nephew rotator cuff repair technique animation, the double row repair of a crescent-shaped tear of the supraspinatus will be demonstrated. This repair will utilize the biocomposite helicoil Regenesorb suture anchor with unique open architecture and preloaded with Ultra Tape and Ultra Braid suture, the Footprint Ultra PK suture anchor with interlocking screw technology, and the TruePass suture passer, which simultaneously passes and retrieves suture or Ultra Tape in one step. These products are employed to complete a repair which eliminates the need to tie arthroscopic knot while still providing a medial suture bridge and increased tendon-to-bone contact, as opposed to a repair using traditional suture. This technique is achieved by using an anterior portal, a lateral portal, and a posterior portal. Visualization during the repair steps is accomplished through the posterior viewing portal. A superior lateral portal is used for placing the medial anchors. In preparation for the repair, a bursectomy is performed, assessing mobility and the nature of the tear. Before inserting the first helicoil Regenesorb 4.75 mm suture anchor, feed the helicoil Regenesorb threaded dilator through the superior lateral portal and create a necessary pilot hole in the posterior medial aspect of the greater tuberosity next to the articular cartilage. Ensure all the dilator threads are sunk into the bone. Then unscrew the dilator and remove it from the shoulder. Insert the helicoil Regenesorb suture anchor into the pilot hole until the laser line on the inserter is flush with the surface of the bone. Remove the anchor from the inserter. Repeat the previous steps to insert a second helicoil Regenesorb suture anchor in the anterior medial aspect of the greater tuberosity. All limbs of Ultra Tape and Ultra Braid suture should be exiting through the same percutaneous incision used for the initial insertion. Using a suture loop grasper, retrieve one limb of Ultra Braid suture from the anterior medial anchor and pull it out through the lateral cannula. Outside of the joint, load the retrieved limb of Ultra Braid suture into the TruePass suture passer. Close the jaws of the instrument and pass it down the lateral cannula. Pass and retrieve the suture anterior medially through the rotator cuff. Outside of the joint, release the suture from the small window on the right-hand side of the upper jaw of the TruePass suture passer. Retrieve the passed suture from the lateral cannula and park it out of the anterior cannula. Retrieve a limb of Ultra Tape suture from the anterior medial helicoil Regenesorb suture anchor. Again, using the TruePass suture passer, pass the Ultra Tape suture anterior medially through the rotator cuff slightly more medial to the first passed limb of suture. End this passing and retrieving sequence with the Ultra Tape suture exiting out of the anterior cannula. Repeat the previous step, passing the second limb of Ultra Tape suture from the anterior medial suture anchor. All limbs of Ultra Tape and Ultra Braid from this suture anchor are now passed and should be exiting out of the anterior cannula. Retrieve one limb of Ultra Braid suture from the posterior medial helicoil Regenesorb suture anchor and pull it back out through the lateral cannula. Pass the suture posterior medially through the rotator cuff tendon using the TruePass suture passer. Retrieve the passed suture from the lateral cannula and park it out of the posterior cannula. Retrieve a limb of Ultra Tape suture from the posterior medial helicoil Regenesorb suture anchor. Using the TruePass suture passer, pass the Ultra Tape suture posterior medially through the rotator cuff slightly more medial to the first passed limb of suture. End this passing and retrieving sequence with the Ultra Tape suture exiting out of the posterior cannula. Repeat the previous step, passing the second limb of ultra-tape suture from the posterior medial suture anchor. All limbs of ultra-tape and ultra-braid sutures from the anchor should now be passed and exiting out of the posterior cannula. Using the suture loop grasper, retrieve both passed limbs of ultra-braid suture, one from the anterior and the other from the posterior cannula. Bring both limbs out of the lateral cannula. Outside of the cannula, tie the ends of both ultra-braid suture limbs together and trim any excess suture tails. Pull on the ultra-braid suture limbs exiting from the anterior and posterior cannulas, sliding the knotted suture down onto the rotator cuff tendon. Using a suture loop grasper, retrieve the most anteriorly passed limb of ultra-tape suture and the remaining limb of suture parked out of the anterior cannula, along with the most anteriorly passed limb of ultra-tape suture from the posterior cannula. Bring these three limbs out of the lateral cannula. Thread the retrieved limbs through the threader tab of the footprint Ultra PK suture anchor and clamp a hemostat over the threaded limbs to hold them in place. Introduce the gold-tapered awl into the lateral cannula and create a hole on the anterior lateral aspect of the humera, tapping to ensure the laser mark on the awl is flush with the bone. Remove the awl. Remove the hemostat. Taking up a small amount of slack from the ultra tape and the ultra braid sutures, introduce the footprint Ultra PK suture anchor into the lateral cannula, taking care not to twist the sutures. Position the anchor over the prepared pilot hole, taking care to align the eyelet so that it faces the tendon where the suture limbs enter the anchor. Tap the footprint Ultra PK suture anchor into the bone down to the laser mark. Remove the green stay suture from the cleats on the anchor inserter and discard. Maintain light downward pressure on the anchor inserter while individually tensioning the limbs of ultra tape and ultra braid suture through the footprint Ultra PK anchor until desired repair tension is achieved. While maintaining light downward pressure on the inserter, rotate the knob clockwise to deploy the interlocking plug. Continue rotating the knob until a loud click can be heard. Now rotate the knob 1/4 turn counterclockwise. This will allow for easy separation of the anchor from the inserter. Remove the inserter. Using the Smith & Nephew flush suture cutter, trim the tails of suture flush to the footprint Ultra PK suture anchor. Repeat the previous sequence of steps to lock the remaining free limbs of ultra tape and ultra braid suture into a second footprint Ultra PK suture anchor to complete the repair.